JT.
Sure.
I'd like to start off by asking you about the pressures of becoming a professional football player. And perhaps, and if you're comfortable, you could talk us through your journey.
Well, I think the pressure started from, for me, 6 years old. Started at 5, but at 6 I went into Charlton Athletic, into their development centre. And it's probably from then that's when the pressure started. So the younger academy managers, academy coaches, they'd come and watch the development boys at 6 and 7, because they'd be basically getting the team ready for when they go into under 9s to have their first sort of academy age group in place. So yeah, probably from 6, that's when the pressure started, and never from family at home, because they just wanted me to enjoy my football. But it's just knowing that you're being sort of watched and assessed.
So you, at the age of 6, you started to feel the pressure? Did you look back and realise that, or did you realise it at the time?
So at the time, you didn't think, I feel like I'm under pressure or anything, but it felt different to when I was playing for my Sunday league team. Right. So when I played for my Sunday league team, I played with such at Charlton I did play with freedom at that age, but there was a slight, if you watched me play in my Sunday league team versus when I was at Charlton, you'd see that there's a slight difference. And it wasn't probably until I got to 13, 14 that I realised, oh no, there was these pressures.
So you probably, when do you think, I wouldn't say the enjoyment went out of it, but was that a factor in it with the enjoyment in football? You said you played for your local team.
Yeah, I think because I was so all in all I was at Charlton for, about 8 years. I got released from there at the end of the under 14 season. And then I took a few months out. My dad said, do you want to carry on? Do you want to go straight back in, or do you want a bit of a break because you've been in it since the start? Yeah. And I said, I want a few months off. And then that's when I went back to Sunday league football, just to sort of get some confidence back, get some belief back in myself. And that's just when I was like, wow. So these last 8 years, I just got more and more comfortable and just started playing within myself. And it wasn't until 15 when I went back into Sunday league football that I just grew this confidence and the belief that I once had when I was very young. And then that helped me to now progress up the divisions and to better teams.
Wow. So how did that work then? So you started at 6 and you left at 14 at Charlton. Yeah. So was it Planet Football? Was it just football, or how did it work? So you went to the academy in the evenings after school, or did you get to a point where they were educating you at the academy as well?
Yeah, so all up until I was 16, I was, my parents are very much your sort of academic side, your schooling comes first. Once you've done your GCSEs, then you couldn't just think football only. So yeah, it was 3 evenings a week, and then obviously a match on the weekend, up until 15, 16. And then yeah, from 16 onwards, when I went up to Huddersfield, and done my scholarship there, that's when I could just forget about all the sort of academic side of things and just focus fully on football.
And how did you so at 14, you I suppose it was rejection. How did you deal with that, of being knocked back? And do you remember that day?
I remember that so clearly. There was a few things that I was juggling at that time. So it was everyone at school, all my friendship group, and everyone else in the year. I wouldn't say I was the popular kid, but you're one of the ones that is looked at, he's the one that's in the... I was the only boy in an academy, I think, at my school that I was at in secondary school. But it was, everyone that knew Jordan knew, he's the one that plays football kind of thing. When I got the news from Charlton, obviously I burst into tears and whatever, because it's and that's the team I supported as well. So it was it's my everything. So that was the first thing, just getting that rejection from the club and thinking, but they don't want me anymore. That was super difficult. But the most challenging thing in that period was going back into school, because I was thinking, wow.
14 years of age, you're the kid that's not in the academy.
Exactly.
Going back into
yeah. And I remember there's even a couple of friends that I had at the time that were so you're not the player that we all thought you was. And it was really, I remember I had a couple of days off after I got the news from school, because I just didn't want to go in and see anyone. And then when sort of the word got out, and so I think I said to my close friends, I'm not at Charlton anymore. Yeah. Again, there was a few comments that knocked me. And it's I didn't want to look anyone in the eye. So it was tough, but since then, I've had rejection since then, and these have been so much more straightforward. And I think the further you get along your football career, that you know there's always going to be failure or rejection around the corner, so it's just part and parcel of it, and it's just the industry you're in. So that first one getting rejected or getting released from Charlton, that was super difficult. But since then, I learned a lot from that, and you don't have the same problem with friends and peers because they've been quite close, and I talk to them a lot about my football and what's going on. They understand sort of the game more now, so they know that next week I could be out the door, or do you know what I mean? So it's not looking at you like, oh, you're not this, you know? So yeah, that first one was difficult, but ever since it's just, you just kind of brush it off and just go again.
It's quite timely really, because I watched an interview with Trent Alexander-Arnold, if you saw it, with Sally Nugent from the BBC at the start of the week. I think they were at the Liverpool Academy.
Right.
And they were talking about, I think it was 3 out of 4 academy players don't make it, and the stresses of going through that and rejection, as you spoke about, especially at the age of 14 years of age. So I guess my next question is about people. You said that people knew you for being Jordan, the footballer. You know, do you think did you have an identity at the time, or do you think you were on, as I mentioned, Planet Football?
Yeah. So that was, it's funny because it's only in this since joining Hampton that I'm no longer, Jordan, nice to see you, how's football doing? Oh, Jordan, it's now, Jordan, how are you? Or how's the business going? So all up until really 21, 22, it was, everyone knew me as a footballer, friends, family, and there was nothing, no one's done anything wrong there, but they always knew me to be kicking the ball about. And I always said from probably 17, 18, I was like, there's more to life for me than just football. And I didn't want to be known as Jordan the footballer. I wanted to be known as Jordan who plays football and runs a business or whatever it may be. So I didn't ever struggle with that. But now that people, the first thing when they see me isn't house football necessarily, it is quite a refreshing feeling, and that's something I've always wanted.
They want to know about you as a person, an individual.
Exactly, yeah. So, but even like I do the same to like some friends that have played football all their life, and that's all they do, and I'll say, like, how's football? Because you want to show that you care. So it's nothing against anyone, but it's just nice to know that there's more to talk to me about, I hope, than just football. So
I find it fascinating because when I left the army, I obviously went to work Premier League Football Club, and I said to you before that the difference. The lads were, some of them, it's just life skills. I think they probably, I mean, you might have experienced this as well. I don't know what they taught you in the academy as a young age, but some of the guys didn't know whether to put diesel or petrol in their cars. They didn't know. They don't know how to use a washing machine, don't know how to use an iron, do any ironing. And you think, well, those real life skills, and they get scooped up in Planet Football, and their life is a wash bag and a pair of headphones, getting on off the bus, going into the changing room, everything's done for them. And then at the end of it, they get spat out by the system at 30, 35, 36, whenever they retire, and they've got to start over again, and they've got no life experience. It must be, do they teach you that kind of, those life skills in the academy?
So I've been quite fortunate. So I think the first part of that is I was lucky to have 2 parents that kept me grounded. That my dad, when I was from very young up until now really, he'd have me at the back door, sort of after a game, washing my boots, polish my boots, just all of them kind of stuff, probably similar to what you guys were doing in the army. And that was from the youngest stage. When we'd go over to the park to train, me and my older brother with him on a Saturday morning, he'd make us carry everything. So we carried the footballs, we carried the cones, and it was just always that after, when I was at Charlton, we'd like play on the top pitches, and the car park was all the way down at the bottom of the training ground. And a lot of the other boys, their dads would just carry their big bag of everything in. Their dads would carry their bag. You'd never see that with me. Like, it was always, no, you take your own bag. So just little things like that, from a sort of at home point of view, I always luckily had that instilled in me from both my parents. But then when you go into the football environment, as you said, your kit gets washed for you, your boots get cleaned for you, all you need is your wash bag and your headphones. So you just, if you've come from an environment where you didn't have that discipline instilled in you, then you've got no chance. But for me, I was lucky, probably mainly when I was at Norwich. So I was there for 4 years, and the academy manager there, he was very big on, they obviously had everything done for you, they had a kitman, etc. But with us younger boys, he said, once you're on a first team contract and you're playing in the first team every week, then you can just, do you know what I mean, let everyone do everything for you. But with us academy boys that were like on the fringes of training with the first team, etc., he made sure that we sort of kept everything tidy. We looked after ourselves. And also we was obviously living sort of in flats and apartments, etc. In the under 23s at Norwich, and they'd have a player welfare guy that would come and inspect your apartments. So as simple as
how did that work out? Did it like quickies come in, quick tidy up, or were you pretty disciplined?
So they, I can't remember if they warned us or not, but
probably. It was being. I mean, I know that the jungle drums start being quite early when things like that happen.
And the thing is, it was like obviously they were looking to see if there's maybe alcohol or you're sort of doing drugs, and they need to make sure that I'd imagine that's probably like the reason why they started doing these things. But then it even got down to the point with some of us boys that were sort of, you didn't see any alcohol lying about. But I remember one of the boys had like loads of pairs of trainers, and he was sponsored by Adidas. So he didn't buy them; they were just given to him, kind of thing. And the player welfare guy sort of pulled him in the office and said, "Oh, like, is everything alright? Basically, not if you've got a spending addiction, but if you've been buying those." So in terms of that was really good for us, because it kept us sort of on our toes and made sure that we kept everything in line. So back to my point, I was lucky that I had a club there that kind of instilled in it, even though it was a top academy. We was looked after, but they made sure that we wasn't completely wrapped up in cotton, and we had an understanding that this isn't the real world. This football world isn't the real world.
What else did they teach you outside of football? Did you have any kind of like lessons on general life and life skills?
Yeah, so again, and even at Huddersfield they've done this. I had a couple of workshops there, but we used to have workshops at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, where you'd have ex-footballers come in and either tell you about how their life kind of went in a downward spiral during and after football, but then also you had sort of finance guys come in. You had also, but we used to get the chefs at the training ground. They used to like give us cooking lessons and things like this. So there was, there were quite a few. I'm probably forgetting some things, but there were definitely quite a lot of things that they made sure we knew and we had access to, so that we're not just football and just nothing else.
Because I do, my time around some of the players, I found they're poorly advised on things sometimes.
Right.
And it's great you said your family were really supportive. Kept an eye on you, kept you grounded. That's really important in life. Is your family side of it, especially your dad? Did he play football?
No, he never played football. But he was. It's weird because I asked him now. I said, "Dad, how did you know to sort of instill discipline in us from a young age, and just because surely it's easy I'm not a parent, but from a parent's point of view, you just want to look after your kid and do everything for them." And I said, "How did you know to do these things?" And he just said to me, "I know what the real world's like. If I want you to have a chance in football or in life, there's certain sort of values and things that you got to go by that have to be kind of adhered to." And I think I listened to your the video you put in earlier in the group chat, and then you're talking about making your bed and when you'd have the sort of the checks of your uniform, there any little thing that, and I think that in itself is just, it translates so much, not only in the art, but it's a bigger thing than just making sure there's not a crease in it's just that discipline. So I think that's huge. And when you take it into football, especially if you want a chance in football, you've got to be, or in the army, you've got to be disciplined. And
absolutely. And I always say to people, when I was younger, I set my alarm in the morning. I never hit the snooze button, because if you hit the snooze button, you're basically saying to yourself, I can delay my day being started, and it used to get me off on the wrong foot. So alarm went off, bang, I was up. Hit the snooze button, you're delaying it.
What age was that from?
Oh, crikey.
Was that from quite young? Where did that come from?
Do you know what? It goes back to an early age when I was a young lad. I think when I wanted to join the SAS as a young boy, because I was influenced by something I'd seen on my television. It was a news report on the Iranian embassy siege back in 1980. And from then, probably sort of 9-10 years of age, I decided that I wanted to join the military and be in the SAS. So
but this is what fascinates me, especially about the SAS and SEALs and all of these top, the elites. So for us, for me, we've got nowadays so many sort of motivational videos you can watch, podcasts you can watch of the likes of yourself and all of these elite individuals from different industries talking about and saying, when you wake up, don't hit the snooze button. So we're hearing that and seeing it from people we look up to. So it's just, like interesting to know, how did you, was it just a natural thing? You knew that if I hit my snooze button now, then I'm going to delay my day. Like what was it for you that?
It was always that will and that urge to get up and train, get up and go running in the morning.
Right.
For me, for the long run, yeah.
Right, that's interesting.
Can I ask you about your Norwich time?
Yeah.
Talk me through that.
So I was at Huddersfield for the first 6 months of my like scholarship. So that was like, I was 16, turning 17. And then a couple of the staff from Huddersfield went to Norwich, and then they liked me, so they brought me along. Yeah. And then I kind of got thrown in the deep end. I was still only 16, but I was sort of with the under 23s set up, and I was like playing with them, training with them, etc. I had a few sort of weeks with the first team here and there. And I think if I look back at my time there, not that I have regrets, because I just think I wasn't mature enough to be able to take on information and go and do it. Like, go and do extra. You should do extra training after your session finishes on your crossing and your defending.
Did you go back out and do the extra training, or?
I did in some spells, but I didn't do it enough. And I think I look at all the facilities and the knowledge that's in that building, and I just didn't make the most of it. And again, friends, like family and peers, that, like my teammates, older teammates that would sort of help us younger boys, they'd always tell us like, do extras after training. You'd go and see the first team after their training. You've got all the youngsters doing crossing or shooting, whatever it may be. And you're seeing it there. If you want to get to the Premier League, the Championship, the top, you've got to do it. And I think I was just too immature at the time to be able to be like, that's what I need to do. So yeah, I don't have any regrets with that. But I think the biggest thing I learned was just seeing, as you were at the top in the elite of your game, that there's no room for error. Yeah. They're not gonna bring you along. You've got to want it so much, and just all the small details that go into performing at your best is like no other. And I think just thinking back to all of the little things that I'd come in from a training session and see one of the first team boys, as soon as they finish training, he's in the gym just doing like loads of core exercises, and I'm just like, and every day, there was never a time where it wasn't, in on their days off. And it was just so good to get that insight, because it shows that if I do want to get myself back up the leagues, then that's what it takes.
Did you get into the first team?
So it was when COVID happened, so everyone was still in lockdown, but the Premier League restart happened. I think it was end of May, start of June. And then 5 of us under 23s boys got called back in, and we were just training with a couple of coaches. And then, I don't know if it was maybe like a week later, a couple of us got sort of said, the manager wants you guys to go and train with them. So we just thought, oh, that's unbelievable. Went and trained with them, and then for the rest of that season, I stayed with them, and then made my debut on the last game of the season. And it was obviously it was.
What was that like?
You know, it's crazy because like when I think back to it, like as cliche as it sounds, it was just a blur. Like it was a blur, and I remember.
Was it just overload?
Overload. And it's only now I've got a couple of I got a video of when I'm like walking out to look at the pitch before the game, and I done it like so discreetly. I didn't want anyone to think that I'm but it was just it doesn't seem real. It don't seem real that like I remember the first time I was on the bench was against Arsenal, and I just saw like Aubameyang just standing talking to the referee, and I was like, oh wow, like this is crazy.
It's something you've worked for to get to that point.
Exactly. And I remember when the evening of when I made my debut, I got back to Norwich, and I sent like the longest message to like my family, like my immediate family's group chat. And I'd started with my mum, then went to my dad, my brother, my sister, and I sent them like all like a huge paragraph on like just thanking them, and just it was such a like emotional moment.
Have you still got that?
Yeah. And I look back at it from time to time just to remind myself of like what it meant, and
what
just
it felt like
and just the love that I had from them, and just all of the little things that they may forget that they've done to help me get to that point. And it was obviously such an emotional time, but it was one that is an experience you'll never forget. So that was good.
And what happened at Norwich?
So the end of that season, they sent me out on loan and said, you need to go play some men's games. So I was on a proper high. I thought, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna go on loan. I'm gonna sort of play for the whole season, and I've got this kind of thing. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be in Norwich's first team. Didn't go anything like that.
Where did you go on loan?
I went to Leyton Orient.
Okay.
So I was in League 2 at the time, and I thought I was going to play every week, as every youngster does, just deluded, I guess. And yeah, I played a few times for them, once in the league, couple in the cup. And I went back 6 months early. I went back at Christmas just because I wasn't playing and I was out of favour. But that period at Leyton Orient was the hardest period that I've ever had in my football career. Like that was, I remember like I was doing things so out of character. Like anyone that knows me knows like Jordan's got a good attitude, he's professional, etc. And that period there, when I look back to how I was behaving, I was like, that just wasn't me. So for example, we'd have a training session and as soon as the whistle went like, yeah, boys, we're done, I would literally walk into the changing room, get my stuff, and cause we couldn't shower at this point, I think because it was still COVID, so you had to go home and shower. I got my stuff and just left like within 30 seconds of this. And imagine how
you wanted out of there, you wanted to bug out.
It's just mad to think how bad that looks. But I wasn't like that immediately, but when I got to the point as where I was like, I just felt hard done by as a young kid and etc. I was just like doing things like that and I was like, that's just not in my nature. I go home, my dad would come into my room and we'd just talk and he'd just try and say like, just help me out, etc. Give me some advice. But yeah, I just wanted out and it was the biggest learning curve I had, and that probably like molded me into being fairly thick-skinned now.
When you went on loan then, did you kind of feel looked after by Norwich? Were you out on a limb a little bit, people stay in contact with you? Because it's almost like, there you go, off you go type thing, and it must be quite difficult as a young lad.
Yeah, but so for me, luckily, obviously, I was living at home because Leyton Orient wasn't too far from my house, so I was around my family, thank God. But also Norwich, like I said, their player welfare system there was second to none. Like they were so good with all of their players on loan or that weren't on loan. So they was in constant contact. I still even, his name's Clive, I even still speak to him now and meet up with him, etc. So yeah, no, they really looked after us, regardless of if they want you out of the club or if they're throwing you out on loan, whatever it is, that they were really good at that. I know it's rare, but they really made it their business to make sure that all players were looked after.
So you went back to the club, did you play any more games? Or?
Yes, so I went back at Christmas and then I was just with the 23s now, just to the end of the season. And I enjoyed that bit actually. So when I came back, they basically said, look, we're not going to offer you anything for the following season. You need to go and play like men's football. And they actually had my best interest at heart because it was needed. Do you know what I mean? We need to go play games. But I enjoyed that last 6 months there because the academy manager and sort of under 23s coach at the time, they pulled me in the office and basically said, look, Jordan, it's not here for you anymore come the end of the season, but sort of could you help the younger boys, the boys that are a couple of years younger than you, give them insight to what it's like to go on loan and just give them as much knowledge as you can and be around them. And I was just like, yeah. And maybe some players would be like, oh, why am I doing that? I'm getting kicked out the door. But for me, it was, they done so well for me and they gave me everything. They was like looked after me. They gave me the best chance like possible. So I was like, why wouldn't I want to, do you know what I mean? Just give everything to the younger boys. And I had a couple of chats with a few of them and just try to give any advice I can to help them on their next sort of part of their journey. So I actually enjoyed that last period.
That probably helps you as well with the kind of, it's about rejection before, of giving something to them and going out on good terms and leaving there.
Exactly. And I think there was no need to go out and sulk and not say bye to anyone, etc. because they were good people, they done well for me. And
you never know later on in life what's going to happen, who you're going to meet from there.
Exactly.
And bridges with people.
Exactly. And one of the coaches now, I think last time I saw him, he was a first team coach at MK Dons. And so everyone moves around so quickly. So you never know like who you're going to bump into down the line. But yeah, they were good people. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to be able to help the few boys that I can. But at the same time, I was well aware that there was boys a few years older than me that were in the first team, like actual first team regulars that would give me advice. And like I said earlier, I didn't take any advice on board. So I was never like, I'd never imposed myself on them with my advice.
Here's a question. Was it difficult to take the right advice, if that makes sense? So people giving you lots of advice, did you know the people that were genuine about it or weren't so genuine about the advice? Because that's, as a young kid, that's kind of what I experienced joining the military is some people didn't have your best interests at heart when they're giving you some advice.
Right. Yeah, maybe I was quite naive then because I think everyone that gave me advice, I'd probably just listen to. I didn't take action with most of it, but I did listen to.
You probably learned to filter it though as you got older, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And it's interesting you asked that because it was only a couple of weeks ago actually. I was like, I'm getting so much good advice from so many good people around me. This is more in terms of business now. And I'm like, which one's not right and wrong, but like I'm listening to so much, I'm getting dragged in different directions. I need to like kind of maybe pick one person. I'm like, I talk to you in depth about things and you give me a lot of advice, because I think if you take advice from him and him, they're all coming from maybe different angles, different sort of ideas they're thinking about, and then you end up getting dragged in too many directions. So yeah, that's probably something I'm still learning now actually.
Probably because with football, you know football. With business, you don't know the business. You don't know business. And
exactly.
What is the business you've got?
So I have an art business. We basically handle fine art from design and creation all the way through to manufacturing. So I have like a cap that I wear when I'm an artist, and then I also have another cap that I wear when I help galleries and artists, like independent artists. I produce their sort of original work onto sort of prints, just to help them sell their other pieces, which has been a breath of fresh air as well, to be honest.
Oh, good for you. Yeah. And what do you think the next 5 years looks like for you? Or is that too far ahead?
No, to give a specific answer, it's probably too far ahead, but just in general, just to keep, as cliche as it sounds, just to keep improving in football and just see where my potential can take me, and just who knows what league I'll get to, where I'll end up. That's just something that isn't really down to you. I can control what I can control. So just see how far I can get in football, and know that when it's all said and done, I've not had any regrets. Yeah. So that's my biggest thing in terms of football. And then in terms of business side of things, just try and grow my business, take it around the country, then hopefully around the world. That's the aim. And then just in my personal life, just keep trying to master myself and become a better person, get closer to myself and find myself more and more as the years go on. And it's just a continued sort of improvement. And I think that's probably the most fulfilling way to live your life, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I got a question for you. I've been thinking about this. What would you say is the one fundamental thing that a person needs to become an SAS, part of the SAS? The one fundamental thing, if there is.
One thing. Ooh.
Maybe one of the main.
If I could pick out one word, it would be robustness. Physical and mental robustness. You can be, physically you can be the fittest person in the world, but mentally, when I turn up to SAS selection, there's guys there turn up, and I remember standing in a room full of 210 guys when we were on the course. I remember looking around the room and thinking, you've got guys there of all different shapes and sizes. Got guys there that go to the gym, that were all chiseled, that stand in the mirror doing weights. Right. No disrespect to them, thought they were fit, they look fit, they're physically fit, but actually when the pressure's on and when you're running and got weight on your back, that's when people mentally start to break. Right, okay. And that's what, you might have a small, wiry, skinny guy that turns up and he's just going and going. And it's kind of, that robustness is really important. And I always remember as well, whenever I used to train for selection, I never used to listen to music, because you're not going to listen to music when you're doing the course. You don't listen to it when you're in the jungle, but guys need it to motivate themselves and to keep going. But for me, it was, right, be disciplined, go out and run.
You're not going to get that.
Yeah, because I remember on test week, we did like a test week that's up and down over the Brecon Beacons, and I went past this lad and he had a set of headphones in. And I was just double take. I looked at him, what are you doing? He went, I'm bored. And I was like, well, you wait until you get to the jungle then. You won't have those in your ears, I'll tell you, if you get that far. Yeah, robustness is probably the robustness,
And one more thing. So when I train, I've only learned this in the last few years from some coaches that I've trained with sort of outside of football, outside of the club. They tell us to train deliberately and train with like a conscious mind. So I used to float through training sessions. I've had thousands of training sessions from young, and if you look at where my ability was compared to the amount of sessions I've done, I probably should be way higher if I didn't just float through sessions. So I've now learned...
You sort of coasted through them a little bit, you didn't push yourself enough.
Yes, and I've now learned in the last couple of years, which is why I think I've probably improved a lot more in this short space of time, is that every training session, I'm so conscious of what I'm doing, and I'm just constantly thinking about everything I do, and that's just allowed me to not think when I'm on the pitch, because now you've like sort of trained it up to become a habit and instinct. So in the SAS, like when you and your teams were training, was that a thing? Like was you always in a kind of a conscious mindset, or like how did that work? And was it very deliberate training?
It's interesting. We trained as hard as we could and as realistic as we could. Okay. And I think a lot of it, doing that selection process, you go through a common gateway, and once you've passed the course, everyone's the same at the same standards. Okay. But you know, when I went through selection, there were guys that I shared a room with that, you know, over the Brecon Beacons would be. I used to hear guys talking, I might save myself a little bit on this one and not push myself, and you know, just come in like you know. But for me, it was I had to go out and I had to do the best I could, because I realised at a young age that maximum achievement requires maximum effort, and there were no shortcuts, quick fixes, hacks, or cheats to get to the top. And that's the one thing that I realised, luckily from a young age, because you know I suppose the hard work and the kind of the satisfaction that I was looking for was buried deep in the hard work that a lot of people want to avoid. Yes. Because it's the easy way out. But for me, like yourself, you throw yourself into a training session, you give 100%. And if you push yourself in the training, you know, you can push yourself on the pitch. And
it's interesting. There's one bit you just said there about like the satisfaction comes from like the deepest moments of hard work. It just takes me back to, so you asked about sort of when I was at Norwich and my time there and getting it with the first team, etc. And I look back less at the photos of me on the pitch making my coming on the pitch, and more so when we was in lockdown before we went back for the Premier League restart. I remember I was with a friend of mine that we were just training, running, just me and him just run early in the morning, running up this hill near my house. And just one day, random, it was in start of May, but it was like hammering it down and it's freezing, and he's got a video of me running up this hill and just doing some crazy things, and I look back at that and I'm like, the satisfaction and the fulfillment that gives me, because I'm like, all of that work there is what resulted in me getting the sort of the thing about I get to make my debut, etc., etc. So it was just as you said there, it's the journey and the tough times when you've had to dig in that I think is the bit you look back on sort of most fondly of.
I agree, and I think it goes back to that being comfortable in the uncomfortable. You can push yourself and get used to that feeling of being uncomfortable or feeling comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. One thing I was going to ask you about, you mentioned video, film and stuff, social media. How's that affected you over the years? Negative, positive ways, I'd imagine. I mean, is there anything that springs to mind from old?
So luckily, my brother, my older brother, he's to this day he's not on social media, never has been. I don't think it ever will be. So I always kind of looked up to him. So I had some different platforms at the time when I was younger, growing up, but I never really posted often. I was quite private, didn't really want to put too much out on there. So I guess naturally I wasn't an easy target. But then obviously once you then go into the sort of full-time game, majority of people, you start posting maybe photos weekly of games and updating things, etc.
You put yourself in the boxing ring with people socially, I suppose.
Exactly. But then again, I was still quite reluctant to do so. So I wasn't an easy target. But there was, when I was at Orient, the first game I played was a cup game, and the first 45 minutes were the worst 45 minutes I think I've ever played.
You got slaughtered.
I've gone on Twitter that evening. And it was just, I've got screenshots of all of the messages now, and they were bad. And I was sitting in my living room, and I was just looking at this, like, it was at midnight, and I was like, it really hurt.
I bet it did. Someone literally let someone into your life at midnight in your own house.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And that's the only thing that sprung to mind. But soon after that, I stopped looking when I was at Leyton Orient, but soon after that, if I see someone, I think I saw someone not long ago sort of put a comment that wasn't the best comment, but I can take the mick out of myself. Like I always like laugh at myself and sort of have myself off. So no one can come to me with something that I'm not. Yeah. If you said I've had a crap game,
it must affect young players though that are reading social media.
Yes, I've even got a close friend that's sort of quite in the limelight. He's doing well for himself, and there's been a couple of periods where he's he's deactivated his accounts because it got quite tough. And he just thought, I don't want to be seeing this hate, etc. So yeah, he's probably the only person I know that's sort of had it quite hard on there. And I think come off it for 6 months, come off it for even 3 months. And I always say like the periods that I've been completely away from social media, I love it. Like you there's so much going on in the world. You're like you don't miss anything. No. So I get it's difficult for some people to come off it, but I think just give yourself even like a 4-week window. Be like, I'm just gonna delete all the apps off my phone and just see if that helps. And yeah, I think you're always gonna get people that are gonna try and drag you down, but it's just, I think if you become thick-skinned enough, and through football you definitely become thick-skinned.
Did you get taught about social media when you were younger?
Yeah, so again, all academies, so Charlton all the way through to sort of Norwich, they were quite good with making sure that we didn't have any comments up from years back, for example, homophobic comments, racist comments, anything like that, because they were basically saying if you do go and progress, if you play for Norwich, an Ipswich Town fan's going to look through your thing and find something from back in the day, and it's just going to come back and go against you. So yeah, they were all very made us mindful of that. And yeah, you just naturally learn to not post loads of things. You can't post too much about when you're going out with your mates, and even if it's in the off season and there's sort of alcohol on the table, it's just best just not to post it. Do you know what I mean? Post something that's not as, because someone's always going to find something to have a sort of go at you at. So
what advice would you give a young, social media wise here, what advice would you give to a young football player or young academy player who's on social media? How would you not let it affect you if you were younger?
Good question. I would probably say, it's easy to say try not to, but I'd probably say limit your time on there. Don't go searching Jordan Tom, don't go searching your name, because you could have a blinder of a game and get 1,000 unbelievable comments about how good you are, and etc. etc.
The one negative one.
That one negative one, and you hear people say it all the time, but that one negative one is the one that you end up thinking about. So I just say, put your ego to the side. Don't go looking for your name or go looking to see if anyone's talking about you in the comments, etc. Post your photo from the game. If you want to be a bit corny and say good 3-1 win today, on to the next, whatever, do that, but then just come off it. Don't even look at the likes. Don't look at who's liking my photo, who's following me. So I'd say that, look, it's probably going to be advice wasted, because as I said before, I think until you're ready to make change or act in a certain way, you'll find that yourself, and you won't need someone to tell you. So I think that's why I always think advice is it's an interesting thing, because if you're giving advice, they're probably not ready to take it on. But yeah, that'd be my thing. Just limit your time that you can on there. So I got one more for you. It's gone on my mind now. Yeah, this was it. The grueling training that you got put through, time and time again, and from a young age. When you got out actually into like the real operations now, etc., did that really prepare you for it, or once you got out into now the real combat, was it still like you could have maybe trained on this, or is it, did it prepare you enough? Is my question.
It's a good question, actually. When you're training, you can only go so far into reality and realism of it, but it's very different when the shooting starts. It's very different when someone's shooting at you for the first time. They're not firing blanks. You can't train for that, and it's you can train as hard as you want, but that reality is not there. And when the first time it happens, you're like, this is what it's about. It's probably like when you first go out and play your first Premier League game of football, when you make that jump up from being in the academy up, you're like, I'm with the big boys now. This is where it could all go horribly wrong.
Right.
That's when the reality kind of sets in, I suppose.
Yeah, so you can't train for being shot at.
No, but you can do as much as you can around all of our drills and our SOPs, our operating procedures. You do as much as you can, and a lot of them are born out of old operations that we've adjusted and made good and fit for future operations. So that experience counts a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. But for me, being a young lad and going away on my first operation was, an unbelievable feeling, really unbelievable. And you kind of I was quite lucky because I went on my first operation within 2 months of me being in the SAS, and you kind of get accepted because I went on quite a big job, shall we say. So you get accepted quite quick.
I'd imagine you have to be. Yourself. I'd imagine you probably have to be because there's no time to. I think even when you told us boys sort of your whole story and journey, and it was quite that first job you had. You had no time to be sort of working your way in. It was like accepted, and now you're on to. It's
interesting because put it in football terms as well and turn it back. We always say that the military and sport and football in particular are quite similar because when I went away on my first job. I realised that passing selection process is 6 months long. Getting into a squadron and being in the SAS, it goes up a level because it's a hard course to pass, but it's actually harder to stay there because the pressure's on you and you've got to perform. And I suppose it's like if you break into the Premier League team or a first team in any league, the pressure is on you. And the 1 minute you make a mistake, it'll get highlighted. And we're not a visible organisation as well. And guys do get themselves in trouble for various things and end up getting guys kicked out. Guys get asked.
Is that another thing? So obviously, not it's secretive, but it's not out there like the operations you do, and it's quite.
No.
Was there a thing of social media for you guys and
not on it? Never on it. No. Never on it. No.
And was it told you're not on it, or you just knew that I don't even want to?
If you no, you don't. That is a big no.
Really?
Yeah, a massive no for obvious reasons. That just doesn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no cameras, nothing. It just does not happen. And but yeah, I've seen guys kicked out for all sorts of stuff. For misbehaving themselves, not performing. Various reasons. So you spend all that time getting there. And then some guys think they've made it.
You do once.
And then guess what? You've got the rest of your career there. And if you don't conform, the pace of life there is pretty fast. The turnaround is pretty quick. Mm-hmm. You a lot of courses, a lot of travelling. You're always away. So fast pace of life, which kind of reminded me a little bit. And I suppose you could compare it a little bit with a Premier League team or any team. Now, even for the home games, the lads are staying away from overnight, the night before, so they go to a hotel. And the London club that I used to work for, they stay in the hotel the night before the game. Mm-hmm. I think I worked it out, they're away for about 2/3 of the year at their home. When you think about it, when you Champions League games are away maybe for 2 nights, maybe 2 games a week, there's a lot, they're away a lot.
That's good.
Jordan, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much, mate. Good to see you. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Thank you. We are done, Mr. George.